The movie opens on Mars, at the landing site of the NASA Space Shuttle Ares 3, where we see some astronauts collecting sand samples. The astronauts' crew members are Mark Watney, Rick Martinez, Alex Vogel, Chris Beck, Beth Johansson, and the commander, Melissa Lewis. The crew gets an alert about an incoming storm, so they should head back to their habitat station. Commander Lewis believes the storm to be severe, so she aborts their mission, despite Mark insisting they wait out. The commander takes the crew towards MAV, their ship that will fly them out of Mars. Martinez is already in the MAV, while the crew marches their way in the storm. On their course, Mark gets hit with a satellite dish, which knocks him out of their sight. The commander orders everyone to board the MAV while she looks for Mark. Mark's suit systems appear offline, so they assume he's dead. Martinez informs Lewis that they are running out of time, so they depart without him. Back on Earth, the director of NASA, Teddy Sanders, announces Mark Watney's death at a press conference. The next day, on Mars, we see Mark is still alive, but he's low on oxygen, and an antenna impaled him. Mark walks back to the habitat station and pulls out the antenna and tends to his wounds. He stitches himself and starts recording a video journal of his situation. He reveals that he can't contact anyone, and there's not enough food for him to survive because it'll take 4 years till the next mission launches. He starts counting the food supply and deduces that he can survive for at least a year if he rations. Mark is a botanist and realizes he needs to grow more food on a planet where nothing grows. He decides to use the crew's feces and bring soil inside the station to grow potatoes, using small potatoes for seeding. Mark realizes he would need water to grow these plants, so he devises a plan to make water, using the rocket fuel called hydrazine, and burning it, which results in creating water. He tries to burn the fuel, but mistakenly causes an explosion. He then realizes his mistake and uses protection to create water again, and he succeeds. It is now day 58, and Mark notices that a tiny plant has grown in his potato field. Back on Earth, Teddy Sanders holds a funeral memorial for Mark. At the Space Center in Houston, the director of Mars missions, Vincent Kapoor, meets with Teddy. They both discuss the bad press NASA would have to face when they find satellite images of Mark's corpse rotting on Mars. Meanwhile, Mindy Park, communications engineer at the Space Center, receives the satellite images from Mars. She notices movement activity at their habitat station and quickly informs Vincent and Teddy. Along with them, we meet Annie Montrose, the director of NASA's media relations. Teddy orders them not to mention the Mark's crew on the Hermes about his survival because they're en route back to Earth and this information can compromise their mission. Teddy now holds a press conference and reveals Mark's survival. Back on Mars, Mark decides to travel to Ares 4's landing site, where the next crew will arrive after 4 years. He only has one rover to travel with limited battery, but also no heater, which causes trouble for him at night. On his way, he uses the plutonium box that his crew left here, but they were assigned not to use it since it was dangerous. But it can help Mark with his heater problem, so he takes it. At NASA, Teddy holds a meeting with Bruce Ng, director of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Teddy asks how long it will take them to send supplies to Mark, and Bruce reveals it will take them 9 months. It's been 48 days now since Mark planted the potatoes, and now they are all grown, and he has 400 potatoes now. Mark now locates a Pathfinder probe that stopped working in 1997 and drives his rover towards it. Meanwhile, Mindy and Vincent are monitoring his moves and realize what he's doing, so Vincent meets with Bruce at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. There, they uncover the 1997 Pathfinder probe that is linked with the probe on Mars, while Mark finds the probe buried and digs it out. He brings it back to his station and turns it on while the crew at JPL starts receiving transmission. Their crew member, Timmy, reveals the only way to communicate through these probes is to move the camera, so Mark writes messages on boards and pins them in front of the probe camera. They use a complex communication method and inform Mark how to alter the Pathfinder and use it for message sharing through its broadcasting frequencies. Mark succeeds, and he receives texts from Vincent, who informs him that they are planning to send a probe for his food supply until Ares 4 arrives. Hermes flight director Mitch Henderson insists on informing his crew about Mark's survival, so he sends a video recording for the crew. The crew is relieved and upset because they left him behind. Back at NASA, they plan to send the supply probe, which they estimate will reach Mark's 868th day. At night, Mark is turning in for the night, but he mistakenly causes the hatch of the station to blast off, causing all his plants to get destroyed. He realizes he'll starve to death before help arrives for him. Meanwhile, Teddy orders Bruce and his team to not spend days on testing their probes to save time and send help early. NASA authorizes Mark to communicate with his crew members at the Hermes through Pathfinder, and he catches up with them. Mark now seals the station with a plastic bag and counts his remaining potatoes. Back at JPL, we meet one of Bruce's crew members, named Purnell, who specializes in astrodynamics. He figures out a way to rescue Mark and starts doing the math to confirm it. Now Mark has to eat once in 3 days to remain alive, while Bruce and his team are preparing the probe. They are set to launch and monitor the probe successfully launching only to explode in the upper atmosphere. Vincent informs Mark about the probe's crash, so Mark sends a text to his commander, Lewis. He tells her to inform his parents that he loves them and will die believing what is right, and he bravely faced the consequences of his actions. On the other hand, we meet Guoming and Zhu Tao, the executives at the China National Space Administration. They see the news about NASA's failed attempt to launch a probe and decide to aid NASA with their classified booster technology. Teddy gets a call from the Chinese, and he accepts their help. Meanwhile, Rich makes his way to Vincent to inform his rescue plan. Vincent holds a meeting where Rich meets with Annie and Teddy, where he reveals his plan. He explains that in order to save Mark, they need the Hermes shuttle not to land on Earth, but rather to go around it, while they launch their new supply probe for the Hermes extended voyage, which will attach to the atmosphere. The shuttle will then head back to Mars and rescue Mark. Everyone agrees with the plan, except for Teddy, who deems it too dangerous because it will put the lives of the rest of the crew members in jeopardy. Mitch disagrees with Teddy and secretly sends the message to Hermes about Mark's rescue plan. The crew discusses with each other and determines that they will be spending 533 additional days on the ship before they see their families. But in the end, they all agree to rescue Mark. Back at NASA, they notice Hermes is off its course and heading for the slingshot route to rescue Mark. Teddy meets with Mitch because he knows Mitch alerted the Hermes and tells him to resign after this mission. The plan is now conveyed to Mark, and he gets to work. NASA stars working with China to launch their probe, while the crew at Hermes contacts their families. Meanwhile, Mark is preparing the rover to drive to the Ares 4 site to use the Ares 4 MAV, which was placed well before the Ares 4 mission. The new probe successfully launches, and the crew at Hermes guides it towards their shuttle and heads towards Mars. Now, 7 months have passed on Mars, and we see Mark with overgrown facial hair and has gone very skinny due to low food supply. He begins his journey towards the Ares 4 site, which is a 3,200-kilometer journey. He stops every time during his journey to recharge the rover with solar panels. Back at NASA, the folks decide that Mark will have to remove a lot of parts from his MAV, including the front piece, to increase his speed. They also mention removing the control system, because the Hermes will be remote controlling the MAV. Vincent informs Mark, but he is agitated by it. Mark reaches the Ares 4 site and records his last video journal. He reaches the MAV and starts taking things off of it. He throws away 5,000 kilograms worth of hardware and resources to lighten the MAV and covers the top of the MAV with the HAB canvas. Meanwhile, the Hermes is almost there to Mars, so the commander, Lewis, starts delegating tasks to the crew members. Back on Earth, the news is covering the live broadcasting of Mark's rescue, as the entire planet is rooting for Mark to make it back home. Mark now trims his hair and wears the spacesuit. He turns on the MAV and contacts the crew at Hermes. He connects with Commander Lewis, who informs him to sit tight while Martinez launches the MAV remotely. She mentions he might pass out as well due to no barriers. Martinez launches the MAV into space as Mark notices the canvas blew away. Mark enters the atmosphere and passes out. The crew finds out that their intercept velocity is still not enough, meaning they won't be able to catch Mark. Mark wakes up and suggests making a hole in his suit's hand, using the escaping air as a thruster to move towards them. Lewis disagrees and tells Alex to make a tiny bomb that will blow up one of their vault doors, causing the air to leak and slowing them down enough to catch Mark. Alex specializes in chemistry, so he and Beth make the bomb and bring it to Beck. Beth advises Beck to avoid the blast while kissing his helmet, because they are secretly dating. Beck places the bomb, and it explodes, slowing down the shuttle. Martinez informs them they are still a bit far from Mark, so Lewis heads out to rescue him herself. She puts on a spacesuit as Beck attaches a wire to her back. She reaches the wire's limit, yet Mark is still far, so he decides to puncture his suit and uses the air as thrusters. He heads towards Lewis but fails to grab her hand, but grabs onto her wire. He reunites with his commander, and they pull them back inside. NASA gets informed about Mark's rescue, and they all cheer as the entire world celebrates. Mark reunites with his crew members happily, and we see that after some time, Mark is safely back on Earth. Mark has become quite the celebrity and teaches a class at NASA about space survival. NASA has now launched an Ares 5 mission to Mars, where Martinez is on board as the commander. Bruce and Vincent watch the launch at JPL, as Rich joins them. Lewis watches the launch with her husband, as Beth and Beck watch the launch from the hospital with their newborn. Alex watches it with his family as Vincent shakes hands with the Chinese for their new ventures. The movie ends here.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this to help the channel out. Have a nice day.